Hello and welcome. My name is Raphael, and in this video I will be talking about evolution, specifically the evidence of evolution. Evolution is the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth. Biological evolution is not simply a matter of change over time. Lots of things change over time. Trees lose their leaves, mountain ranges rise and erode, but they aren't examples of biological evolution because they don't involve descent through genetic inheritance. The central idea of biological evolution is that all species on Earth share a common ancestor, just as you and your cousins share a common grandmother. Through the process of descent with modification, the common ancestor of life on Earth gave rise to the fantastic diversity that we see documented in the fossil record and around us today. Evolution means that we're all distant cousins, humans and oak trees, hummingbirds and whales. The idea of evolution as we know it was proposed by Charles Darwin and Alfred Wallace, and published in the book On the Origin of Species in 1859. The theory was based on the idea of natural selection, where only organisms who were better adapted to their environments tend to survive and produce more offspring. Evolution has two fundamental processes: the change within a lineage and the formation of new lineages. To explain the change within a lineage, we need to go back in time about 60 million years ago. During that time, the ancestors of the modern horse were only about 20 inches tall. Over the course of time, you had the evolution of the modern horse, which today stands at about 6.5 feet tall. So we can see this change within a lineage. The other fundamental process within evolution is the formation of new lineages, or the idea of common ancestry of species. For example, if we were to go back many millions of years ago, horses, donkeys, and zebras all shared a single ancestor species. But then they had this split of the single species into what became three new species: the modern horse, the modern zebra, and the modern donkey. There is no easier way to see evidence of evolution than using fossils. Fossil records provide a permanent visual representation of the evolution of organisms on Earth. Take this previous example of the horse fossil record. Here it is evident that not only the height changed, but also the various skeletal structures. So looking at, for example, their legs, the earliest horses there didn't have hooves, but had these individual toes. And you can see this change over time towards the modern hoof. Their skulls also show signs of evolution in this fossil record. Vestigial structures are pretty much bones or body parts that may have had a use but no longer do. As seen on some organisms, these structures have no apparent function and appear to be residual parts from a past ancestor. For example, some snakes have pelvic bones, despite having no legs, because they descended from reptiles that did have legs. Another example of a structure with no function is the human vermiform appendix. These unused structures without function are called vestigial structures. Other examples of vestigial structures are wings, which may have other functions on flightless birds like the ostrich, leaves on a cacti, traces of pelvic bones in whales, and sightless eyes of cave animals. Another evidence of evolution is the existence of homologous structures. Pretty much it is a fancy way of saying similar bone structure. Homologous structures are those characteristics on different organisms that are similar but may not necessarily perform the same function. For instance, the forelimbs of humans and bats are homologous structures. Although they are used differently, the basic skeletal structure is the same, and they are derived from the same embryonic origin. Their similarity could indicate a likely evolution from a common ancestor. In comparison, the structures showing similar function but evolve separately are analogous structures. These structures from different species do not share a common ancestor. For example, the fins of a fish and the flippers of a whale, mammals, are analogous structures. These animals use them for swimming. However, they are evolutionarily not related in a way that they do share a common ancestor. Biogeography is the study of the distributions of organisms in geographical space and geological time. Simply put, biogeography is a record of inheritance. A good example of this is the Asian and African elephants. Each of these elephants have very specific characteristics based on their geographic location. In other words, it is very easy to tell the type of elephant by looking at their ears. For example, another well-known example is the finches and tortoises of the Galapagos Island. On each of the islands there are different versions of each creature. There are three types of tortoises, each one designed to help survive in their respective environments. The Hood Island tortoise has a longer neck than their island neighbors. This allows them to reach certain vegetation. The finches are similar depending on their food source. They have adapted and evolved their beaks in order to most effectively get their food source. However, they live within a few miles of each other, but they have distinct differences. Like I discussed before, evolution is change over time. In order for it to happen, there needs to be a change in the environment. Those individuals that have adaptations that allow them to survive that change will live and pass on those adaptations to their children. Those individuals that do not have the proper adaptations will die off. How do these adaptations arise? Well, there needs to be a change in the organism's DNA called a mutation. If those new traits turn out to be beneficial, then the mutated DNA gets passed on. Over time, this new trait will be common in the entire population, and evolution will have happened. Think of DNA as a complex game of telephone. In this game, a person gets a message to pass along to another. As the message passes from one person to the next, the message is distorted, resulting in an evolved or mutated message. In this example, the beginning phrase is "the car is fast." Then it passes on and it stays the same. However, on the third person, it changes to "the cat is fast." This change is like a mutation in DNA, and it stays in the sequence forever. By the end of the game, the sentence now is "the cat is lost." Changes like this let us track where organisms branched off of or what organisms they are closely related to. Scientists rely heavily on DNA and other molecular evidence to show the theory of evolution. This is a fairly recent addition to the library of evidence because Darwin didn't know of DNA and could only speculate about inheritance. However, today DNA evidence is the strongest and irrefutable piece of evidence that evolution exists. I hope that this video helped you understand evolution and the evidence that supports it.